Hi, I'm Claire, and I recently watched a TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert on nurturing creativity, which for me is important because growing up I've always loved English and art and music and acting and things generally considered creative. Uh, for the longest time I wanted to be a writer, and that's still a dream I have and something I want to do. But something I've struggled with, like Elizabeth Gilbert, is fear. And her video made me think about my fears for the first time. She says that now, after her success with Eat, Pray, Love, people treat her like she's doomed. And they ask her if she's worried that nothing she ever writes again will be as good as Eat, Pray, Love. But she also says that when she was a teenager and she told people she wanted to be a writer, she got the same reception. People would ask her, "Aren't you afraid you're never going to be successful?" And she says yes, she is scared of that. And that got me thinking about my own fears, like my fear of failure, of having my dreams dashed, of not being able to do what I want with my life, of letting down my friends and family and myself. But most of all, fear of myself, of how who I am might not be good enough. And each time I recognize those fears, I ask myself if they're worth it. Is being a writer with all of that worry and unpredictability that comes with it? And I'm willing to hold a minimum wage, pay-by-the-hour job after college just so I can go to acting auditions. And I keep weighing the pros and cons, and I will continue to for as long as it takes me to make a decision. But I also ask myself if, when I'm 80 years old, will I be happy if I decide that what I love is not worth all of that worry that comes with it? And my immediate answer is no. And that leads me to believe that somewhere in my vast amounts of interest is what I believe I've been put on this earth to do. And an interesting question that Elizabeth Gilbert poses is it natural for us to fear the work we believe we've been put on in this world to do? But I know I shouldn't be afraid to go after my dreams, so I prepare to commit myself to them. And then all the worries come back, and this never-ending cycle of pressure and fear and worry about how me, can be good enough, authentic enough, confident enough, or beautiful enough to actually get what I want. And I don't believe that I can be all of that. And then comes the fear of not being able to do what I want with my life because I'm not good enough. And I feel like that's common with a lot of people because some people think that their world begins and ends with their ability to be good enough. But maybe that's only part of the truth. And Elizabeth Gilbert completely changed the way I view my creative process to make it a little bit easier. She says that we need to find a way to separate ourselves from our creative work to protect against unmanageable expectations of performance. And she talks about ancient Greece and Rome and how they believed that there was a genius that assisted people. And this genius would literally live in the walls of a studio or room and help an artist create what they were creating. And so each of the people had a genius. They weren't the genius. They were not the genius. They had one. And that shouldered some of the pressure of having to be successful. All of the creativity was not centered around the individual. It did not come from the individual. And that completely altered my view of how creative process can work. Like, when I'm writing a creative story, believing that it all comes from me can put this tension into my writing. Like, I'm only 18, I don't know anything about life or character development, and how can I make the characters real, and the character arc, and what about the plot points, and how far should I space them, and then comes panic, actually. And it all comes back to me not knowing enough. But perhaps if I change my perception of it, if I simply keep writing and plugging along, but I start to maybe think that it doesn't all have to come from me. Maybe that there's a genius or something else that could help me, then I wouldn't have to bear all of the pressure. And that would free the worry and simply let me enjoy putting the words on the paper. But it doesn't have to be a genius, I don't think. Maybe it takes a few tries to figure out what works for us, but maybe it's not what it is, as long as it doesn't completely come from within ourselves. And I don't think that this is strictly for the stereotypical creative person either. It seems like something doctors, lawyers, teachers, we could all use to believe that we are not solely responsible, could allow us better access to creative thought and critical thinking by relieving that tension and pressure. And but I don't think this means that we aren't accountable for our mistakes. Elizabeth Gilbert says that she showed up to do her part of the work every day, and she will continue to because it's her job whether or not her genius shows up or not. And it doesn't mean shirking our responsibilities because we have no control over our life, or it's not our fault if we're not successful, if we do something wrong. It more means being able to channel and relate to our creative ideas and notions without having them overpower us. And it might open up a new way of seeing the world that might allow us to get our ideas out there in a more beneficial way. Thanks for listening.